I'm Cynthia James, and this network is about changing lives one woman at a time. Hello, ladies, and welcome to Women Awakening. I'm your host, Cynthia James, and I'm very honored that I get to be here every week to connect with you, to introduce you to women that inspire me, women that are change makers, women that have taken their lives into their hands to make a difference on this planet. And so we're here every week. We're on Spotify, iTunes, iHeart, Spreaker, Amazon, and we're on YouTube. So please subscribe, come back and meet these women. They will inspire you to step into your greatness, I promise. So my guest today is Alicia White. We call her Allie. And she's a Lyme disease warrior and the founder of the TickChicks.com, a website about all things Lyme. She was misdiagnosed for 6 years. And so Allie used her frustration with the system to build a brand to spread awareness for symptoms, diagnosis, inspiration, and alternative ways to enhance and expedite the healing. So now in remission from this life-shattering and reality-altering experience, Allie brings to us, a fabulous podcast called the Lyme Time Podcast, and it's available on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. And she's got additional videos and discounts on IGTV channel on Instagram. And you go to @the_Tick_Chicks, as well as a private support with hundreds of members on Facebook. This is something that's really interesting. Lyme is usually a mystery illness until diagnosis, and it affects 500,000 people in the US each year alone. And she's on her way to help people get to it, understand it, and heal from it. Allie, welcome. I'm so grateful that you're here.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored and blessed to be here, and I'm excited to talk to you a little bit more about Lyme disease, as well as helping each other out in these times.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your history. Where were you born? How'd you grow up?
I grew up a very free-spirited child in the Midwest, which meant I did a lot of outside playing every summer, barefoot, and exploring. And oftentimes with that and with adventurous spirits and souls, we encounter nature very with open arms. And I find that a lot of people that actually contract Lyme disease are of that ilk. They have an adventurous spirit. They are rock climbers, they're hikers, they're campers, they're hunters, they're gardeners. They love nature and being out in nature. So that's how I grew up. And of course, had my fair share of tick bites along the way, never thinking twice about many of them. So I grew up that way. Along the way, I had contracted a couple of viruses like chicken pox and then later shingles when I was a teenager. So I had the basics and the foundation laying down very nicely for me to contract Lyme disease later on in life. And basically, what I believe is that Lyme disease is systemic, meaning you could have a few breakdowns along the way of your immune system and your immunity where it's not fighting exactly 100% at all times. And what unfortunately happens is something can come along like Lyme disease or a bacteria or another virus that then triggers everything. And before you know it, almost seemingly overnight, you have the recipe for a disaster, which means Lyme disease, what we call Lyme disease. And again, I use it's very a broad term using Lyme disease, right, because basically it's any tick-borne illness or bacteria that's transmitted by either a mosquito, a tick, a flea, those kinds of things that can trigger all of this.
Yeah. So when did you start noticing that you weren't feeling well? Because, 6 years of misdiagnosis is a long time. So when did you start noticing that you didn't feel well? And then what steps were you taking?
Well, first, I'd like to mention the fact that 6 years in the Lyme disease community is probably normal, if not on the early side of catching the actual diagnosis. What happens is there are many, many symptoms that ebb and flow. So it might start out with you notice that you have a sudden onset of arthritis in your hands, or you may have a sudden cognitive dysfunction, or you may have experienced sudden aches and pains in your joints and muscles. You may have a fever, and yet you go to specialist upon specialist, doctor, they take your blood work, and the joke is, oh, you look fine because on the outside you're not exhibiting, any sort of rashes or pock marks or, anything that would say, oh my gosh, she's in crisis, but your body is in crisis. And so 6 years is not uncommon in the Lyme disease community because unfortunately, doctors do not put two and two together. They are specializing in the foot or the stomach or the throat or the brain, and they're not really looking at it as a systemic injury or bacteria. So for 6 years, I was going, and by the way, I live in Los Angeles. I knew straight who to go to for all the experts. I saw the leading, podiatrist because I had trouble walking in the beginning. I thought something was wrong with my feet. And then that resulted in no results other than that it was a nerve damage of some sort. I went to 2 leading neurologists. Still, the test was nowhere on their radar. They were testing me for ALS, MS, lupus, all of the big ones, but the tick-borne illnesses are not on their charts. And so it's very easy to get tossed around. Somebody diagnosed me along the way with fibromyalgia, which fibromyalgia does exist, but I knew it was not my answer. And I went to the doctor who's written 4 books on fibromyalgia at Cedars-Sinai Hospital. Took me 6 months to get in to see him, brought him my stack of papers. And I said, what is wrong? And he did, I don't know, hundreds of vials of blood, split amongst 2 visits. And lo and behold, he said, you do not have fibromyalgia, but I don't have an answer for you. And then I eventually started developing nodules specifically in my armpits, which made my doctors nervous that it could be lymph node related. So they sent me to the Cancer Institute here in Santa Monica, California. Ended up there, ran all the tests, they did the scans. Nope, it is not cancer, but we don't know what these lumps are. And at the end of the day, the man who ran the Angeles clinic there, Dr. Puro, said, have you ever thought about doing a Lyme disease test? And I had thought about doing it, but all the research made me nervous about it. Was it real? Was it not? Was I going to get a definitive test result? Was I not? I didn't really know what to make of Lyme disease. Therefore, I finally surrendered and I said, I've thought about it in the past, but not one doctor has offered to do this for me. And he said, let's do it. So $2,000 later, unfortunately, because the testing has to go through, it's just such a specific test that you have to do. And I did it and it resulted positive. And I went to get a second opinion doing some of the same tests with a different doctor just to verify. And he came up with the exact same conclusion. My test work was absolutely positive for tick-borne illness. And that explains a lot. The symptoms are very similar to COVID and the pandemic, which we're going through right now. Right. And, it goes from brain fog to extreme fatigue, the kind of fatigue where you can't imagine walking 10 steps to use the restroom. And this goes on for months and months, and you just can't get out of it. And something is terribly, terribly wrong, but no doctor is giving you answers.
It's so interesting you say that. I have a client, a young woman, 26 years old, rock climber, just living this great life, who all of a sudden had no energy, couldn't think, and went through all kinds of stuff to find out that she had this. But what I want to talk about is after the discovery, because for her, you then finding the right systems and medications and things for her, because not everybody knew what to do, and then not everything worked on her. So tell me, once you discovered this, then what?
So guess what I found? I found that nobody had the kind of information that I needed. And so therefore, I made it my mission to set out to help other people access the information very quickly. And thank goodness for social media, by the way, especially with the pandemic. Everybody turned to their devices. We were all going stir crazy on our homes. And it was a great instant way for me to get out different information. You mentioned your client. I don't know if you're still based in Colorado or not, but Colorado is surprisingly, I believe, neck and neck, if not number 2, with Lyme disease cases right underneath Maine, which you would not ordinarily expect. I suspect it's because Colorado and Florida are have high incidences of mold in the environment. Therefore, it's a kind of a moldy environment, and mold and Lyme disease go hand in hand. In fact, a lot of Lyme disease people cure their Lyme or get over their Lyme disease, but then are constantly triggered if they're in a work environment with any mold or a living environment with any mold. So I decided afterwards, I was Googling, I was trying to search, I was aimlessly wondering what to do. I knew I had it, but I did not know how to proceed or what my first steps were. So I stumbled along for another 3 years and kind of got it under control. And I found a lot of things that worked and some things that didn't work. And I was able to do a ton of research. If there's anything I'm good at doing, it's obsessing over one thing and really doing my own research. And I decided to start talking with the experts. So that's what my podcast is about. I talk with naturopathic doctors. I talk with integrative doctors. I talk with conventional medicine doctors. I talk to all of the experts in the neurological fields. I have had guests on that explain herbal remedies, because Lyme disease, you have to approach it from all different angles. You can't just say, okay, I'm going to do antibiotics and I'm going to get better. I'm going to do only herbs or only this or only that. It just is you have to attack it like a warrior, and you really have to open your mind. A lot of people don't have open minds when it comes to this. They might feel a little skeptical about going conventional medicine, or the traditional conventional medicine mentality is, I want to kill this. I want to kill this bug. It's no big deal. It's an infection, just like any other infection. If I go on a round of antibiotics, it'll be fine. And that is most likely not the case unless you catch it within hours. So, I took my frustration with not knowing where to start in this community, and frustration with the challenges that I faced and the frustration with the trial and error part of it. And I just put it all into a website of free information, a podcast with free information from all the experts. And I'm just trying to get the word out there. Listen, Lyme disease is diagnosed to 500,000 people in the United States alone per year. It's just too big of a number to ignore. And unfortunately, of that number, a lot of those cases go misdiagnosed or undiagnosed, like myself. And so it's much higher than that anyway. And the big tragedy is that a large percent of Lyme disease patients are children under the age of 10. And like most kids do. They run around, they play, they are active, they're jumping around outside, they're playing with their animals. And we just, as parents, a lot of the times will miss the symptoms. We'll think they have attention deficit disorder or depression or some of these other things. And quite frankly, it's Lyme disease.
Yeah. So this is interesting to me because I want to know, first of all, you're doing research because you want to get well. You weren't setting out to do a podcast. You weren't setting out to be, an information vortex. So I want to know, how are you managing this desire for your own healing and this calling to be of support for others who might be going through the same thing? How are you managing that? Did you know how to do a podcast?
Had no idea. And in the beginning, I had a partner who helped me out a tremendous amount and really educated me in learning how to do social media and the podcast and whatnot. And it was a learning curve. And at times I was frustrated. In fact, in the beginning, I thought, how am I going to make a month's worth of posts on social media? I mean, are people really going to be how would I have that much information? And I started and I haven't stopped. And we pretty much post every day, if not every other day. I do a lot of research posting. We just had a great big study from Johns Hopkins come out yesterday, and I posted it today. And I'm constantly staying on top of the research and articles and publications, cookbooks, all of that stuff. There was a big learning curve. Plus, I wasn't feeling that great. Although I have to say, when I started this website, I was light years ahead of where I had been 6 years prior, 7 years prior to that. I just felt like I had enough energy to do the bare minimum. And now what I'm finding, as happens with women and men that find their passion, it really keeps them going and it catapults them into doing good with what they have to offer. And I would just say to anybody out there that has a passion or feels compelled to help others in any way, you don't have to start with a big, broad knowledge of much. All I know is that I can talk to people and I can inspire people, and I'm not an expert. So what do? I brought the experts to me. I mean, I just had an interview with the New York Times columnist, Ross Douthat, that really, and he writes about Lyme disease in the New York Times when it's not really that popular to do so. But he's also, in his way, acknowledging this disease and also trying to help spread the word.
So you are, okay, so you're going through this. Are you married? Are you in relationship while all this is happening?
Yeah, I have a husband who has been by my side the entire time. And I have 3 children. So I was mothering from my bed for a couple of years. Yeah. And I was confused, and I was also embarrassed, because if you don't have a diagnosis, you are trying to convince yourself it's not really happening, or it's all in your head somehow. The amount of trauma that you go through only from the disbelief in what's happening to you, you're basically contradicting everything that you know to be true in your brain. So it's tricky. It's very tricky. And a lot of people, I did not have depression, but that is one unfortunate sort of side effect of all of this is having a sense of hopelessness, because you can't define it and nobody in your world can understand it. So now I have a Facebook page that's only a support group. I don't really weigh in. I weigh in occasionally, but they can come together. We have 600 members, and they can come together and bounce ideas off each other and not feel so alone. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of isolation that you can experience by just not having the proper medical team on your side. And it will take everybody out there, it will take minimum a year, if not more than that, to get the proper team together that know how to treat Lyme disease. They're called Lyme literate doctors. And there's a great resource called Global Lyme Alliance. They're on the internet, and they can, you type in your location and you can be paired up with some really good doctors out there that know exactly how to treat this.
This is so wonderful. So how do people find you? How do they get to this wealth of knowledge that you're imparting?
So I have a big website. It's called thetickchicks.com. And that's where you can read a lot of blogs. You can find my podcast called Lyme Time. Lyme Time is also available on Apple, Spotify. It's also, I have on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel called The Tick Chicks. And I'm also on social media. So The Tick Chicks on Instagram, Twitter, Meta, which is Facebook, and also Pinterest as well. And I just invite everybody to, if you have a mystery illness, if you have something that is inexplicable, and yet you know in your heart that your life has changed and done a 180 and you don't know exactly what is going on, if you've ruled out other major things that could be going on with your health, I would highly suggest and encourage you to do a Lyme disease test. And if you're curious about testing, I have a podcast with IGeneX Labs. They do only tick-borne illness testing. So if you are convinced this could have been a tick long ago, that maybe you didn't notice there was a rash, maybe you had no rash, maybe you never even saw a tick bite, I would encourage you to do some research with IGeneX Labs. They're the most comprehensive, I would say, and also vibrant labs.
Wonderful. So I ask the same last question of every guest. This show is called Woman Awakening. And what do you think is the most important thing about women awakening at this time on the planet?
I think it's a wonderful time to be a woman on this planet. I think if you look back through history, there have been many different evolutions of women along the way. Sometimes some are in power and sometimes very suppressed. But as a woman, I think we are more intuitive healers, more intuitive leaders. We have the ability to educate and multitask and just be able to reach people on an emotional level, which I love. Of course, I'm generalizing the stereotypical woman, but I think that we have a really good open door right now to continue to lead in this country and into the world as well, and also tap into the resources, whether it's social media or any kind of media for that matter, and to just go ahead and start. Just go ahead and start somewhere, and you'll be surprised at what you can do.
Well, Allie, thank you so much. You're inspirational. Your passion is tangible, and I'm very grateful that you could be here with us today.
Thank you so much, Cynthia.
So, ladies, I'm going to say the same thing I say to you every week. Listen, you're incredible. You're unrepeatable. You're powerful. You're dynamic. You're here for a reason, and your voice matters. So tap into that thing within you that ignites you, that lights you up, and follow that thread. It will take you to the places you need to go. I'm so honored to be with you. I look forward to presenting another woman to you next week. Many blessings.